When developing a new product or tool, assessing the necessary technologies to bring your desired functionality to life can often feel like a chore. Depending on your product requirements, you may need to research and assess numerous off-the-shelf hardware and/or software solutions to incorporate into the end product. Brightly's been kind enough to share his process for assessing technology, making this task feel organized and manageable. So Brightly, your first tip here is to skeletonize a report before getting started. Can you elaborate on this?
Sure. So I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make after they've decided that it's time to actually jump in is that they just get into the research and just start looking at probably the main aspect of the system, which isn't always necessarily a good place to start. So really what you want to do is skeletonize the report, thinking about what outcomes do you need to actually assess in the report, what sort of things overall in the system are incorporated, and then lay those out in such a way that it seems more manageable, and realizing that there are some interdependencies there, and it's, where the actual beginning of your research should start. So laying out the report, skeletonizing the different subsections of all the different hardware, software, technology stacks, operating systems, and so on, and putting those out, it not only makes it more manageable, but it makes you think about where's the right place to begin your research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely does seem to make it more manageable when you break down each section like that versus just thinking of this, big task at hand.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So the second tip that you shared with me was creating a technology matrix or a flow chart. What exactly do you mean by that?
So along with when you analyze it, you're going to realize or maybe just after doing a tad bit of research to start getting your feet wet, that a lot of the technologies are going to be interdependent. So when you evaluate one kind of technology, you may find that precludes going down another route later on. So what you want to do as you discover these things is lay them out in a matrix, which would show you which things may preclude others. So, and then also ideally, you want to try and lay out the research and the way that you investigate things in such a way that you don't end up going down a dead end path. So you want to try and start at what might be the deciding factor, and then work your way down to the details. So to make this concrete in a more realistic example, if you're selecting, let's say you've got an application, a bit of software, firmware that's going to run on a microprocessor, and you're deciding whether or not to go with an RTOS, real-time operating system. So you may want to look at different RTOSes first before you do the chip selection, because what you'll find is when you're doing that research into those real-time operating systems, some of them may already have nice ports, or basically a draft, if you will, of what the basic operating system needs to be for a particular microprocessor. So you don't want to go investigate, because there are hundreds of micros out there. You don't want to go investigate them all and think about which ones might have the right inputs and outputs for your project before you realize that, oh, well, I could have narrowed that down to maybe just 5 or 10 choices, because I know that I probably want to go with this operating system. So laying things out like that and attacking it in an order that makes sense could really be helpful and cut down the overall work.
Absolutely. And the third tip here that you shared was to analyze building it versus buying it. What factors should someone take into account when they're analyzing each of these scenarios?
So after you've skeletonized your document and you're thinking about what the different portions are of the system that you need to be investigating, you always need to ask yourself, when you're looking at those things, do we want to buy something off the shelf that's already built? This is more so applicable to software, of course, because most hardware you're going to buy, of course. But when you're looking at the different software options, do you want to build it yourself, or do you want to go out and get something that's already available? You're not necessarily going to be able to answer the question of which one you should do in each instance, but laying out really during the technology assessment, you're going to want to lay out what things actually can realistically be built as opposed to being bought off the shelf, and if there are any options to buy those things off the shelf. And then you're probably going to have to enlist the help of your engineering team as well to kind of put estimates to, or at least very general ballparks to the effort associated with building it. But you need to actually identify what can be built and what can be bought before you get down that path.
Okay, makes sense. And then the fourth tip. So you mentioned really taking into account the business aspect of product development. So you named like volumes of product, time to market, current resources internally that it would take to do this. Why is that important?
So this is really important because a lot of projects can go down a path of allowing the perfect product to get in the way of actually getting to market. So this goes hand in hand also with build it versus buy it. You know, ideally in very large volumes over a very long run, if you build everything yourself and you're not buying any software, for instance, from any other company, that's probably going to be, yes, the lowest cost option in high volume over a long period of time. But that may not always be the best option for you because the volumes may not be there or the time to market may not allow for it. So this is where, in addition to, as I mentioned before, bringing in those engineering resources, you need to tap the marketing folks and find out when do we actually need to be to market in order to capture the market share that we're looking for, and try and work that backward into a timeline so you can really do a better evaluation of the whole build it versus buy it portion. As well as those volumes and then any sort of license agreements and per piece costs that come along with any pieces that you may be buying and incorporating into your product. You need to also, of course, take those into account. So the main thing is you're really trying by the end to strike a good balance, and it's never going to be perfect, but a reasonable balance that allows you to get to market with a reasonable bill of materials cost and in a reasonable amount of time. So that's really where you have to think about the business aspects, because as I may have mentioned, engineering doesn't take place in a vacuum. Everything is trying to get a product out the door, and if you lose sight of that, you could end up working on something that never makes it to fruition.
Sure. And the very last tip here that you shared, and I know that I often neglect to do this, you said don't be afraid to pick up the phone. I think that's huge. How can we benefit from a simple call versus, say, just emailing for support or the support on a website?
Yeah, even emailing and support and the support chat, those are still steps beyond what a lot of folks, you know, being an engineer myself, you kind of have to get yourself out of your shell and realize that there are other people on the end of the line that if you just call them up and tell them what you're doing, tell them you're doing a technology assessment, you're looking at a couple of different options, you've noticed their RTOS or their software stack or their thing, whatever it is that you have to be interested in during your research, and just talk to them. You never know what you're going to learn by actually talking to another human being. Obviously, their job is to try and sell you something, but they're also there generally, they want to tell you about their product, they want to tell you what it does and how it can save you time. So, and you will often learn things that you didn't expect to just by picking up the phone and talking to these folks, because they may also have a lot of things that are coming down the pipe that aren't necessarily on their website yet, or they might have support options and that are not readily available or advertised out on their page. So when you talk to them, you can kind of get a better feel for what's really would be like to go with their option. Furthermore, sometimes when you actually get people on the phone, you can get a little bit more than the best pricing that might be on their website. Or if you explain what you're looking at, they may have another option that's not necessarily listed, and it could really change your pricing. Just do that, because a lot of times the pricing and the information that you see on the website is for one piece, two piece, bare minimum quantities. If you talk to somebody and tell them what you're thinking, they can tell you where the price breaks are and give you a more realistic idea for your actual application. So, yeah, again, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and just talk to somebody. You never know what you might learn.
So you can always learn something new from a conversation.
Yes, and it doesn't cost you anything, just a little bit of time.
Yeah. So I'm seeing here that you have a bonus here, a bonus tip, and you just said prepare for the unexpected.
Yeah, so this is also, don't think of this technology assessment that you're doing as a finalized piece of information. Once you're done with this, things are going to come up. There are going to be unrealized or unknowns that pop up that might mean you have to include another piece of software, another piece of hardware. Something else may come up that you just didn't anticipate. And there's always those market demands that come out of left field, partially through or once you've already started the project. So don't think of your research as a once and done sort of endeavor. Think of it as a living document. It gives you something to go back to. It gives you a place to put those contacts that you may have made, or those little tidbits of information that you might have to go back and revisit. And sometimes you got to dig a little deeper, add a section to it. But never expect that once you're done an evaluation that you won't go back and touch it anymore. It really is, it should be a knowledge base or a resource that you can visit. So that's really the biggest thing about expecting the unexpected.
And I think also something that just came to mind was this document. You have this document. It might be for a specific product or a specific project, but I'm sure that you can use that information, in future projects or in future builds down the line. So really being thorough about it initially can probably save time later on.
Absolutely. So as you'll probably find as you do product development, very rarely is one product completely different than the last. And even if it is for a completely different purpose, a lot of the underlying technologies are still there. So as fast as technology may change, software and real-time operating systems and stacks for protocols and whatnot are slowly evolving. So the research that you do now is probably still going to be relevant and might just need to be retouched in a year or two or a couple months down the road. So keep hold of these things after you do them. They could be useful, like you said.
Absolutely. So thanks, Riley, for your time and for sharing these 5 tips on performing a technology assessment. For those of you who are viewing this video, we hope that you found this helpful. I certainly found this helpful. And if you have any questions or if we can be of assistance, please don't hesitate to contact PSI.
If you found this video to be helpful and would like to learn more, or if you'd like to learn about another specific software development related topic, let us know in the comments below or send us a message at info@psi-software.com.